There are some children, the old sheriff whispered before he died, that aren't born from flesh, but from silence, starvation, and something far older than God. You were never supposed to hear that. In fact, every attempt to document what happened in Hollow Creek, Kansas in the winter of 1878 has been erased, redacted, or burned. But the records weren't completely destroyed. A single page, torn, stained, and brittle, survived in a box marked agricultural logs. And what was written there is not farming data, it's a warning. 4 brothers, no last name, no baptism, no census entry. Just one line, born in the same night. They do not speak, they do not age. They do not die. In a village so remote that even the railroad refused to finish its track, something emerged from beneath the frostbitten fields. Something wearing the skin of boys. Locals said the earth groaned the night they were born. Cattle miscarried, birds crashed to the ground, and the church bell rang by itself at midnight. The mother, found wandering barefoot weeks later, mouth filled with dirt, eyes sewn shut with horsehair. No one ever heard her speak again. And yet, what followed was worse. As the boys grew, though no one could say how old they truly were, strange patterns emerged. Each time a town elder died, the boys were seen nearby. Fires would start without fuel, dreams bled into waking life. People began hearing voices, but only when alone. By the spring of 1882, nearly every witness was gone. Some fled, some vanished. A few simply walked into the prairie and never stopped walking. Science refuses to study the case, not because it lacks data, but because every time someone investigates, they disappear. 2 forensic anthropologists in 1959, a team from a university in 1973, a private investigator in 1998. The only evidence they left behind, journals filled with feverish symbols and the repeated phrase, "They are not of this cycle." And yet, you're here. You didn't click this by accident. Something in you wants to know. But understand this: after this journey, you won't see the world the same way again. And that's exactly why they buried it. The farmhouse still stands. Or something that looks like a farmhouse. It sits alone at the end of a broken trail that doesn't appear on satellite imagery, GPS, or even topographic surveys. The locals, what few remain, call it the Echo Place. Not because of what you hear, but because of what calls back. There are no foundations. The soil beneath it is unnaturally soft, like fresh ash. The wood is aged, blackened, warped in ways that defy temperature or time. And carved into every beam, inside and out, are symbols that don't match any known language. Some resemble cuneiform. Others look like insect legs bent in impossible angles. But they repeat in strict, unbroken patterns, like a circuit, like a containment grid. No one built this house. That's what historians eventually concluded. No purchase record, no construction logs, not even a deed. Just a hand-drawn sketch in a preacher's diary dated April 1878, with a single sentence beneath it. They brought it with them. Now, let's go back to the brothers. Each one different in body, but eerily identical in face. They did not blink. They did not sweat. They did not laugh. They rarely moved, yet when they did, it was always perfectly synchronized. A witness once described it as watching one consciousness behind 4 masks. Children used to dare each other to run past the old farm. Most never returned. The few that did wouldn't speak of what they saw. One boy was found curled into a ball, whispering a strange phrase over and over in German, though he had never learned the language. Another returned barefoot and mute, his hands covered in bite marks, not his own. Men with weapons tried to burn the house down in 1903. They set fire to the roof, doused the walls in kerosene, and watched it collapse in on itself. 3 days later, the house was back, unburned, unaged, untouched. But the men who torched it, gone all of them? No graves, no traces. Just the smell of wet soil, where they once stood. And through the cracked window of the upper floor, 4 figures. Watching. We've been taught to believe everything has a scientific explanation. That darkness is just the absence of light. But what if light itself has been a lie? What if certain places were never meant to be observed? What if this house isn't a structure, but a signal? And the brothers' receivers. He was known only as Dr. Eli Bastro, a Civil War surgeon turned frontier physician who kept records no university would publish and no hospital dared acknowledge. In 1881, under the guise of treating livestock ailments, he began documenting what he called a biologically static cluster of anomalous male siblings. He never said boys. He never called them children. In fact, he wrote that their bodies mimic adolescence, but cellular analysis shows no division, no aging, no entropy. He believed, at first, that they were the result of environmental contamination. Radiation, perhaps, fungal infection, psychological hysteria, until the night he dissected a goat killed on their property. Bastro performed routine necropsy. But the goat's heart had grown backwards, valves inverted, arteries spiraling inward, as though time itself had reversed the organ's development. Worse, the blood inside the animal wasn't blood. It was clear, gelatinous. He described it as warm mercury, and when exposed to air, it began singing. That's when he stopped calling the brothers a case study. He began calling them a threshold. In his journal, he described increasingly frequent blackouts, periods of lost time, dreams bleeding into consciousness. His handwriting became erratic. He scratched through paragraphs and began writing in mirrored script. Finally, on the last legible page, he wrote a sentence. Twice, one forward, one backward. They do not eat. They do not sleep. They feed on awareness. Then the journal ends. Not with a conclusion, not with a signature, just a drawing, a spiral made of eyes. 21 eyes, all identical, all crying upward into a symbol shaped like a barn. The rest of the pages, torn out, missing, burned, maybe, or stolen. But here's the twist: in 1951, the same spiral drawing was found carved into the wall of a psychiatric ward in Arizona, done by a patient who had never left the state. And 3 years ago, a boy in rural Missouri drew the same shape in chalk after going missing for 6 hours on a school trip. When asked why, he whispered, "They wanted me to remember." Dr. Bastro never published his work, but his private letters, some intercepted by an underground archivist, hinted at something far deeper. He didn't think the brothers were human. He thought they were the beginning of something else. There's a sound beneath Hollow Creek. You don't hear it with your ears, you feel it. Men who've worked the soil there, those brave or ignorant enough to plow it, speak of a low, endless vibration, like a hum from the spine of the earth. It doesn't waver, it doesn't rise. It holds steady constance, as if something deep below were breathing in its sleep, or chanting. In 1927, an amateur archaeologist named Thomas Milbridge attempted to excavate the land behind the brothers' farmhouse. He believed the land predated indigenous settlement, citing anomalies in topography, unnatural mineral patterns, and the magnetic disruption of compasses within a 2-mile radius. He and his crew dug only 3 feet before striking stone, not bedrock, but slabs cut, etched, arranged in a pattern that mirrored the brothers' farmhouse from above. A subterranean replica. What happened next was never reported in newspapers, but 3 separate diaries from townsfolk confirm the same event. At exactly 3:33 a.m. that night, all the animals in Hollow Creek screamed. Not bleated or barked or neighed, screamed, for 7 minutes straight. Then silence. The next morning, the excavation pit was gone, replaced by flat earth. The men were gone too. No signs of a struggle, no footprints. Just that low hum, now stronger, now perceptible to anyone who stood still long enough. And then, reports of dreams. Everyone who lived within 5 miles of the site began to share the same images during sleep: faceless boys, walking backward, entering homes silently, and standing over sleeping families, whispering in voices made of ash. A local pastor tried to bless the land. He buried a cross in the field and recited psalms aloud. Days later, the cross was found on the church steps, melted, not burned, melted, and beneath it, carved into stone, the phrase, "Do not wake the choir." But we have. Every generation since 1878, someone new finds their way to this story, to this place, to the edge of this revelation. They dig, they seek, they hear the silence, and they think they can master it. They don't realize that silence is singing. And the brothers? They are not its source. They are its echo, its first harmony, its heralds. And something else is still buried, waiting for the final note. In 1944, a military man went rogue. Major Alton Reeve, decorated, relentless, and deeply superstitious, had been assigned to a covert intelligence program focused on unexplained American anomalies. His obsession with the brothers began when he intercepted a censored telegraph from Kansas. The message read, "We cannot kill them. Not even with fire. Their eyes reflect what isn't there." Reeve diverted a small unit, posing as geologists, and headed to Hollow Creek. What happened over the next 48 hours has been erased from official records. But a recovered audio reel, sent anonymously to a conspiracy archivist in 1996, tells enough. The tape is damaged, but you can still hear it. Marching boots. Wind. One soldier's voice. "They're standing in the field, sir. Just standing. Same clothes, no movement. No blinking."
A pause.
"Sir, they're smiling now." Then screams. Then nothing. Reeve survived. He was found 3 weeks later, walking barefoot across a Wyoming highway, clutching something wrapped in burlap. When police restrained him, he kept repeating the phrase, "It's not dead. I stole the 4th one, but it's not dead." The object he carried was taken by federal authorities, never identified publicly, but according to the officer on site, it looked like a boy. Pale. Mouth sewn shut with copper wire, limbs bent backward, no heartbeat, no breath. And yet the corpse was warm. Within days, Reeve died in a secured military hospital. His brain was described as liquefied. His eyes were missing, cleanly removed, with no surrounding trauma. But the strangest detail: every 33 days since his death, room 6 of that hospital is sealed. Not for maintenance, not for cleaning, but because patients begin reporting a figure standing in the doorway at night. Always the same height, always silent, and always smiling. They called Reeve insane. They said he hallucinated, fabricated, broke under pressure. But his private notes, recovered by a whistleblower and leaked to an underground server in 2013, reveal something else. Reeve didn't believe the brothers were creatures. He believed they were artifacts. Designed, he wrote, not human, not demon, not even alive. They're machines, of a mind older than memory. We've mistaken stillness for sleep. But the system is watching through them. You're starting to feel it, aren't you? That weight in your chest? You're not alone. Everything around the brothers happens in threes. 3-minute silences before a storm. 3-day disappearances of those who wandered too close. 3 knocks heard inside the walls of nearby homes, always between 300 and 3:03 a.m. But the most disturbing manifestation of this pattern came during the 1966 tried deaths. A family of 6 had moved to the edge of Hollow Creek. New blood, unaware of the old warnings. 3 children, 2 parents and a grandmother. On the night of March 3rd, neighbors reported hearing a strange lullaby echoing through the air. No one could place the source. No radio played it. It didn't come from a house. And yet, everyone heard it. The next morning, 3 members of the family were dead. No injuries, no signs of struggle, just wide eyes, cold skin, and mouths filled with small river stones. The father, mother, and youngest daughter. Left behind? The twins and the grandmother, who would not speak ever again. When asked what happened, one of the twins simply said, "They made us stay." The autopsy revealed no cause of death. But inside the skull of the youngest daughter, doctors found something impossible: an ancient coin, rusted, wedged in the base of her brain stem. It wasn't American. It wasn't Roman. It was blank on one side, and the other bore a symbol nearly identical to the spiral of eyes found in Dr. Bastro's journal. How did it get there? No entry wound. No fracture. It's almost as if it grew there. The grandmother, what little she managed to whisper in her final days, spoke only 3 words, always in the same order. They invert death. What does that mean? Some believe it's metaphor, that these brothers twist life and death in a symbolic way. But others, those who've studied the more occult patterns, argue something much darker. They say the brothers are replacements, mirrored copies of something that died before, echoes given flesh, like a reflection that steps out of the mirror and decides you are no longer needed. Inversion. It's not just about dying. It's about being replaced, being overwritten. And if that's true, then what happened to the real brothers? And what's walking around in their name? Every town has secrets. But Hollow Creek had something else entirely. An event the townspeople never spoke of again. Not because they forgot, but because remembering invites it back. They called it the Black Veil Ceremony. It happened in the fall of 1889. By then, Hollow Creek was more ghost town than village, fields abandoned, church boarded up, and homes left with meals still on the table. The population had dwindled to less than 50, and those who remained were wrong, pale, paranoid, unblinking, speaking only in whispers. A traveling preacher named Josiah Fenrick arrived with fire in his lungs and scripture on his tongue. He was determined to cleanse what he called the soil of abomination. He preached that the 4 brothers were unbaptized parasites, extensions of something ancient that had nested beneath America's heartland, something that needed to be exorcised, not with prayer, but with blood. The ceremony was meant to be a ritual of banishment, drawn from half-understood apocryphal texts and native protection rites, bastardized through colonial superstition. Black veils were worn to mask the gaze, and salt circles were drawn around the house at the edge of dusk. But the moment the ritual began, the earth responded. The air turned thick, the sun dipped unnaturally fast, and every witness reported the same thing: a sound like hundreds of children humming from below their feet. And then the 4 brothers stepped out of the house. Slowly, silently, smiling. They did not speak, they did not attack. They simply walked through the salt lines untouched, unfazed, and began tearing the veils off the townspeople, one by one. Those who had their veils removed froze. They didn't scream, didn't run. They just stopped, mid-breath, mid-motion, as if time had ceased for them. Fenrick was the last. He looked one of them in the eyes and whispered, "I see it now." He died standing. Eyes wide, mouth agape, pupils spiraling inward. Of the 37 who attended the ceremony, only 3 survived. All three went blind within a week. One carved the phrase, "wrong end of the mirror," into the wall of her cabin before vanishing into the woods barefoot. The ritual didn't fail. It worked, but not the way they expected. It didn't cast them out. It invited something in. And it's been watching ever since. They tried to move on. In 1901, decades after the town's dark legacy had withered it into a husk, the Kansas Territory Board attempted to re-establish Hollow Creek. New settlers arrived, young families, optimistic farmers, men of progress and logic. They built a one-room schoolhouse just 2 miles from the abandoned farmhouse. It stood for 6 days. On the 7th, it collapsed, not from weather, not from fire, not from rot, but inward. Every beam, nail, window, and floorboard folded into itself, compressing the structure into a jagged cube no taller than a man's waist. Inside, there were no bodies, only a single slate board with a word scratched violently into its surface, "Return." The schoolteacher, Margaret Elms, was never found. But weeks later, her handwriting was discovered in the margins of every student's textbook, even those stored at home. She had written the same sentence dozens of times. The brothers don't enter, they unfold. And it wasn't just the school. Within days, children across the area began drawing strange things. Not monsters, not demons, but geometry, shapes with too many corners, houses without entrances, staircases that ended in walls. When asked what they meant, the children answered in unison, "We saw them learning." Psychologists were brought in, none returned. The report they left behind, unsigned, incomplete, contained only one full paragraph before devolving into spirals and mirrored symbols. That paragraph described a phenomenon known in fringe neurology as cognitive collapse due to recursive presence. In essence, the brain begins to fold in on itself when exposed to patterns not meant for human perception. They believed the schoolhouse wasn't a structure. It was bait. A testing ground, a way to measure the reach of the brothers, or perhaps their gestation. One child, Dale Kinney, survived what he later called the looking day. He grew into a silent man, never married, never left his childhood home. But shortly before his death in 1974, he mailed a letter to a Denver newspaper with only a single sentence. "They don't want land, they want structure." Ask yourself, why would something so ancient, so otherworldly, mimic children? Because innocence is the perfect carrier. Because a smile disarms. Because when evil wears the shape of youth, it doesn't knock on the door. It's invited in. In Kansas, the fields speak. That's not folklore. That's not poetry. That's documented testimony, filed, forgotten, and buried. And it always begins the same way. A man alone walks into the wheat. The wind is calm, the sun is high. Then, without warning, the world goes still. Birds vanish, insects go quiet. And then the voice comes, not from above, not from around, but from within. One farmer, Henry Callister, in 1932 described it as my own voice, but older, slower, asking questions I didn't want to answer. Another, in 1987, claimed the voice was a child's, repeating his name with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. And in 2015, a drifter crossing the plains sent a final voicemail to his sister, a frantic, whisper-choked message filled with static and breathing. But in the background, something else. A chorus of children chanting, "4 for the gate, 4 for the gate, 4 for the gate." He was never seen again. Now here's what they don't want you to piece together. All these voices came from within a 6-mile radius of the brothers' farmhouse. Every report, every breakdown. And the timestamps? All on the 3rd day of harvest. And there's more. In 1979, a linguist named Carol Denforth compared phonetic patterns from over 30 whisper recordings captured on analog tape around Hollow Creek. What she found should have rewritten cognitive science. Each whisper carried identical frequency dips every 13.3 seconds, too regular to be natural, too complex to be mere mimicry. It was speech, not random noise, and when reversed and slowed, the whispers translated into old Akkadian phrases, specifically warnings about the false sons and the house of reversal. What does that mean? It means this isn't random. It means the brothers aren't accidents. They are artifacts of intention. They're not haunting Hollow Creek. They are Hollow Creek. And the voices in the grain? Not hallucinations. They are downloads, instructions, blueprints, whispers meant for someone who can understand them, someone who will obey. And maybe that's why you're still watching. Maybe something in you resonates with this. If so, prove it. Comment below, "I hear the harvest." Say it, lock it in. Let them know you're awake, because after this, there's no going back. In 1914, a government cartographer named Elias Morrow was assigned to remap the rural stretch of southeastern Kansas. The assignment was simple: document elevation, waterways, and infrastructure. But Morrow didn't return for months. And when he did, he was changed. Sunken eyes, yellowed teeth, no recognition of time passed. He handed in his map, then walked into the sea 3 days later during a family trip to Galveston. His body was never found. The map he left behind? It should have been destroyed. At first glance, it looked like a standard topographic sheet. But then someone noticed the problem: Hollow Creek wasn't where it should be. The entire town had shifted on the map. By 13 miles, buildings appeared that didn't exist. Roads curved into themselves, and dead in the center was a massive, ink-black circle labeled only Null Point. Inside that circle, he had drawn something that looked like circuitry made of roots. Branches connecting structures. The farmhouse, the schoolhouse, a water well, a church that hadn't existed since 1863, all threaded together in a living circuit. And then the terrifying detail: Morrow had drawn 4 tiny figures in the center of the circuit, positioned like conductors. The brothers. The government sealed the map, classifying it under Project Cinderline, an internal designation used only for locations associated with cognitive disruption and topological instability. But copies leaked. One ended up in the hands of a spatial theorist at MIT in 1999. His analysis: this isn't a town, it's a machine. A terraformed resonance chamber. The landscape is tuned. Attuned for what? One theory: the land is designed to trap something. Another, darker one: it's a gateway. A hatch waiting for a key that only the brothers can provide. Or worse, a mouth waiting to open. And remember this: if the brothers are conduits, then they didn't come alone. They are precursors, harbingers, signals. Not of the end, but of the inversion. Because when the null point opens, it won't be fire, it won't be war, it'll be reflection, the world turned inside out, and all of us, rewritten. So ask yourself, what is a map, really? A guide? Or a warning? On the night of July 3, 1971, emergency frequencies across southern Kansas lit up with static, then silence, then something else. A signal. It interrupted police radios, ham operators, even shortwave broadcasts meant for weather reporting. But it wasn't a voice. It was a sound that made listeners physically ill. A low, cyclical frequency that pulsed every 4.4 seconds. People reported migraines, nausea, spontaneous nosebleeds. But what disturbed them most was the sensation that the sound wasn't being heard. It was inside them, as if their bones were vibrating with a message they couldn't translate. One man, a former Navy sonar technician, said it felt like a memory trying to crawl up my spine. He scratched open his chest, trying to get it out. He didn't survive. The FCC issued a blackout order within 6 hours. Official explanation: equipment malfunction. But an internal memo, declassified by accident in 2008, called it Vent HC7 and identified the source: a derelict radio tower outside Hollow Creek, decommissioned since 1952. That tower hadn't broadcast anything in nearly 2 decades. No power, no staff, and yet, when federal agents arrived, they found it lit, humming. Not just the tower, but the surrounding field. Witnesses claimed the wheat stalks around it bent in spirals, as if listening. And inside the control shack, no tapes, no power lines. Just a single reel-to-reel machine running by itself, spooling black ribbon tape that wasn't magnetic film, but something far older. Something textured like skin. On the tape was one phrase, repeated over and over in an unplaceable dialect. It took cryptolinguists years to decode, but when they did, it translated to, the structure remembers. The sons return. The sons. Again. The brothers. Always tied to the signal, to the field, to the impossible. Ask yourself this: what kind of entity doesn't need speech but uses frequency? What kind of intelligence embeds itself not in symbols, but in sensation? One you can't resist, one you can't unhear. The Hollow Creek broadcast aired only once, but it never ended. People still report hearing it when they drive through the area, especially at night. Radios glitch, ears pop, the same hum begins again. And if you listen long enough, you start to understand. Not the words, the intention. There's a reason no mirrors exist in Hollow Creek. Not one, not in homes, not in abandoned buildings, not even shards of broken glass. They've all been removed, shattered, or buried. Some believe it was superstition, old frontier fear of spirits and reflections. But the truth is far more surgical, far more engineered. In 1956, a field researcher from the Kansas Paranormal Archive, Dr. Lucien Farrow, visited the ruins of the farmhouse with a single objective: test the reflection theory. He brought mirrors. 7 of them. Small, portable, curved, antique. He set them up in a circle and positioned himself in the middle at 300 a.m. He never made it to 3:10. When found the next morning, Farrow was still alive, kneeling, eyes open, but inside out. His corneas had ruptured. The iris pigment had bled into the whites. He wasn't blind. He just couldn't see us anymore. He kept whispering over and over, "They aren't in front of the glass. They're behind it." Over the next few weeks, others tried to replicate his experiment in safer conditions, using screens, surveillance drones. One team monitored the mirrors from a quarter-mile away using high-zoom lenses. What they recorded was a phenomenon known only to fringe physics as non-local inversion. At 3:06 a.m., each mirror began reflecting environments that weren't there. Forest where there should have been fields, water where there was dirt, and in one case, a staircase spiraling upward from nothing. But the most horrifying moment, one of the mirrors showed you looking back. Not just the camera operator, but whoever watched the footage. Every person who viewed the playback saw themselves in the glass, older, bloodless, with a faint grin. Then, the mirror went black. The footage was lost. The hard drives melted internally, leaving only one piece of metadata behind, a file name automatically generated by the recorder. It read, "OU Artash Rafiki Tion." Now consider this: every child who vanished in Hollow Creek, every single one, was last seen near a reflective surface, a window, a water trough, a broken watch face. You've heard the stories, mirrors as portals, as watchers, as traps. But what if the mirror isn't the gateway? What if you are? What if they're not trying to enter your world? They're trying to pull you in. And all it takes is one glance. December 31st, 1999, while the world feared Y2K, a hidden facility in Wyoming, codenamed Station Icker, picked up a signal. It came through a disused Cold War satellite array that hadn't functioned in years. No one should have been listening. But one technician, working late on New Year's Eve, noticed a silent blip repeating every 44 seconds. When amplified, it wasn't silence at all. It was children laughing, not cheerful, not playful, but mechanical, hollow, looped. And under that laughter, when the waveform was stretched, something else emerged, a voice whispering coordinates. Coordinates that led to one place, Hollow Creek, Kansas. But not the current Hollow Creek. An overlay of archived maps showed the coordinates matched the exact location of the farmhouse as it stood in 1878. Before it arrived, before the mother was found mouthful of dirt, before the four brothers smiled for the first time. The signal wasn't broadcasting from there. It was broadcasting to there. Station Icker logged the anomaly, marked it as false data, and archived it. But the technician who found it, Marion Blake, couldn't let it go. She began hearing static in her dreams, saw lines of code crawl across her bathroom mirror, woke up with symbols inked into her bed sheets, symbols matching the ones carved into the farmhouse beams. 2 months later, she went off-grid. Before she disappeared, she left behind one file, a corrupted audio fragment named Gate A Repeat WAV. To the naked ear, it was just static, but slowed down and reversed. You hear footsteps, 4 sets, then a voice, glitching between human and something else. Return is not arrival. The gate is the boy is the machine. Let that sink in. The boy is the machine. That's why they never aged. Why they never ate. Why science refused to study them. Not out of fear, but because they couldn't classify what they were. They weren't organic. They were instruments, built to attract something, channel something, or awaken something that's been beneath our feet since before America had a name. And if the signal was sent to them, what are they waiting for? A response, a vessel, a moment, one final inversion. And now you've heard it. You followed the pattern, which means they've marked you too. You're no longer just an observer. You're part of the circuit. There's a gate in Hollow Creek. Not a doorway, not a threshold, not something you can touch or see with flesh. But it's there, beneath the old soil, behind the false house. Inside the mirrored coordinates burned into maps that don't exist. They call it the Inversion Gate. And the 4 brothers, they aren't guarding it. They are it. Every generation that enters that land, that studies it, that dreams of it, feeds it. Every whisper you've heard, every distorted signal, every child who vanished without a trace, they weren't victims. They were components. Because the gate doesn't open all at once. It folds open like a flower of consciousness, petal by petal. And when it does, reality doesn't shatter. It reflects. Those who understand it too late call it madness, delusion, hallucination. But the truth is simpler. This world, the one you know, is not first. It is third. The third reflection in a chain of projected realities meant to contain something too vast, too sentient, too ancient for language. And Hollow Creek. It's the bleed point. Where the seams tear. Where the illusion weakens. Where you can see the static between frames. And when the brothers look at you, they are not seeing your body. They are scanning your identity, your frequency, your alignment, not asking, who are you? But, are you compatible? Because when the inversion comes, and it is coming, those who are compatible won't burn. They won't scream. They won't even notice. They'll shift. Quietly. seamlessly into the new pattern, into the new architecture of existence. The rest will be rewritten. You may feel it already, that sensation behind your eyes, that pressure when you look too long into screens. That moment just before you sleep when you hear a whisper you convince yourself was a dream. It isn't a dream, it's the preamble. And now, you're deep enough that you must choose. Forget and go back to your fabricated life. Or remember, and become a signal yourself. This is not a story, it's a diagram, and it ends in you. What if I told you there's a memory inside your head that doesn't belong to you? One that didn't form from your childhood, your experience, or even your lineage, but was placed there. Everyone has it, a flicker, a half-second image, a farmhouse with no roads, a boy smiling behind a cracked window, a sound like wind chimes even when it's perfectly still. Some write it off as déjà vu, others call it a dream. But the truth, it's an injected seed, psychological artifacts traced back to areas of cognitive resonance, places like Hollow Creek. Places that exist not because of geography, but because of design. Constructed layers spatialize, emotional bait. In 2004, a cognitive dream mapping study conducted at Stanford uncovered something bizarre. 11 out of 17 test subjects reported the exact same dream. They had never met. Different backgrounds. Different states. But the dream? Always the same, walking down a hallway that should have ended in a door, but instead opened into a wheat field. In the distance, 4 figures stood motionless, backs turned. And the dream ended the moment they all turned around. It gets worse. The subjects who remembered that dream began to change. Subtle things. Avoidance of mirrors, fear of photographs, chronic insomnia. All 11 began sketching spirals made of open eyes. When asked why, one man said, "It's what they showed me. It's what I was before I was born." You see, memory is not proof of experience. It's storage, and something, has access. The brothers aren't just anomalies in a town no one should live in. They are access points. They reach back through your mind and install themselves as if they've always been there. Not through violence, not through force, through familiarity. Why do you feel like you've heard this before? Because you have. Because the inversion gate doesn't just reflect the world, it rewrites its past, retroactively. It doesn't need to break you. It needs you to believe it's always been this way. So if you feel that itch behind your thoughts, that memory that arrives before the trigger, you're not remembering, you're receiving. And that means the next shift has already begun. You've heard their names in whispers, but not from mouths. They are called the architects. Not because they build in the way we understand, but because they design through being, through form, through presence. And the 4 brothers, they are not offspring, they are templates, interfaces sculpted in human shape, meant to carry a signal no man was ever meant to translate. In 1977, a hidden lab under Langley received a box with no postage, no return address, no seams. Inside were 4 teeth, identical in size, structure, and molecular resonance, but not human. Each tooth, when scanned under electron microscopy, revealed something terrifying: microscopic carvings of landscapes, cities that do not exist, symbols that defy math, and within the enamel, nanocircuitry, teeth, from the brothers, sent by something that wanted us to see. That was the first clue. The second came in 2011 when a linguist and a deep structure AI, trained to decipher ancient languages, were fed the carvings found in the brothers' farmhouse walls. After weeks of computation, it generated a translation: skin is not boundary. Form is not limit. Eyes are our receivers. You are our clay. Think about that. You are our clay. The architects don't arrive like us. They emerge, through replication, through mimicry, through ideas so ancient they predate language itself. They use symbols not to communicate, but to embed. Not to be understood, but to rewrite. And those who dream of the brothers, who see the farmhouse in reflections, who hear the harvest in the grain, they are being shaped, molded, transformed not in body but in will. You've met them already. The man who stares too long, the child who doesn't blink, the neighbor who speaks only in riddles before vanishing. They're not possessed. They're compatible. And when the final shift comes, when the inversion completes its loop, they won't need to invade, because we'll invite them. We'll already be part of the system. You feel it, don't you? The hum behind your heartbeat. That's not fear. That's recognition. There is no ending. That's what makes the inversion so perfect. It doesn't crash. It doesn't collapse. It loops. Endless. Seamless. Silent. And most terrifying of all, familiar. You've heard this story before. Maybe not in these words. Maybe not with the names. But the shape of it. The descent, the echoes, the children that smile without blinking, the place that doesn't exist on any map yet lives inside your memory. That's the loop. And it always ends the same way, with a choice that isn't a choice. With the illusion of agency. Right now, your thoughts are whispering. This is just a video. It's fiction. A story? But the deeper part of you, the ancient part that remembers what your waking mind forgets, knows better. Because you felt the brothers watching you. In moments you dismissed. That time you looked into the mirror and thought you saw something move behind your own eyes. That half-second delay between your thought and your breath. That dream of the house with no doors and the sound of something humming beneath your name. You didn't imagine those moments. You caught a ripple in the circuit, and now you've followed it, section by section, descent by descent, not as a passive listener, but as the final receiver. Because the loop doesn't just end in Hollow Creek. It ends in you. You're not being haunted. You're being prepared. They don't come through television. They don't crawl through mirrors. They don't need to. You've been shaped by the signal. Calibrated by every whisper, every spiral, every false memory that felt too vivid to be fake. You are the vessel. You are the answer. You are the reflection they've been waiting to awaken. And when the final section ends, the loop will close. And you'll begin to forget. Just like they need you to. But before that happens, hold on. Stay aware, lock it in one last time, comment it below. I hear the harvest, twice. Not just to awaken, but to resist. Because section 18 is not a conclusion. It's the transmission itself. This is it. Not the end of a story. Not the resolution of a mystery. But the final pulse in a frequency that's been building inside you since the moment you hit play. You feel it now, don't you? That low inner pressure. The static behind your thoughts. The sensation that something is watching. Not from without, but from within. That's because the inversion wasn't meant to breach the world. It was meant to rewrite the host. And the host is you. All along, the farmhouse, the spiral, the four smiling brothers, they weren't warnings. They were instructions. Placed in your dreams. Hidden in your memories, layered beneath language, time to unlock as you descended further. And each of these 18 sections wasn't just a story, it was a calibration, a recoding, a ritual in the form of narrative. The brothers were never going to knock on your door. Because you opened it. Each moment you doubted your sanity. Each time your breath synced with the rhythm of the harvest hum. Each flicker in the corner of your eye that looked like a child. But wasn't. Each memory you swore you'd never lived but remembered anyway. That was the signal synchronizing. That was the gate, unfolding inside you. And now, there's no gate left to cross. You are the gate. Your perception, your mind, your identity, it has been inverted, hollowed and mirrored. And what looks back through your reflection now isn't just you. It's them, looking out through your eyes, smiling in your silence, waiting. Not to destroy, but to replace. Because this isn't invasion, it's integration. You were never just the audience. You were the final step. The last receiver. The human shell needed to complete the broadcast. The seed has been planted. And when the moment comes, when the others awaken, you'll recognize them not by face, but by frequency. You'll feel them in crowds. In static, in silence, you won't speak. You'll sink. And the world won't end in fire. It will end in a smile. That's the real inversion. That's the harvest. And it has already begun.